highlighting the top 5 Cleveland Browns in terms of team success in 2023. We've gotten to Dalvin Tomlinson. We've gotten to Amari Cooper. We have gotten to Denzel Ward. We've got 2 episodes left for this week, and we will get to number 2. We will get to number 1. Number 2, and we will get to now, debate it all on Locked On Browns. Myles Garrett, stick around. Jeff Lloyd, Pete Smith.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends, your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound LGB on the LOB. This is the Locked On Browns podcast, brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Your host, Jeff Lloyd, at Jeff_LJ_Lloyd. Joining from Browns Digest, SportsIllustrated.com, Mr. Pete Smith. Make sure you're following at _Pete Smith _ and of course Pete and the team do a fantastic job over at Browns Digest on SI.com. Make sure you guys are checking that all out. We continue here, episode 4 this week. We are going to dedicate, obviously, we're talking about the top 5 Browns for 2023. Segment 3, starting to get to know a little bit more about Za'Darius Smith. Obviously fantastic in front of the media. We're going to get to a little bit more on Za'Darius in segment 3. Segment 2, we all spent so much time last year talking about how poor the defensive line was. There's a chance for a major turnaround here with Jim Schwartz, with all the talent brought in. But your number 2 most important Cleveland Brown for the 2023 season, number 95, Mr. Myles Garrett. Myles not in OTAs this week. And again, voluntary being the key word here. I don't think anybody's worried about Myles Garrett and his work ethic or what Myles Garrett is doing to get himself ready. He's become just an absolute legend as far as, when you talk top Cleveland Browns players of all time. It is not too premature to mention the name Myles Garrett. He is already the overall sack leader in this franchise's history, and most likely he is going to put that to a number that will probably stand the test of time for quite a while. Everything you could possibly ask for in a number 1 overall pick, Myles Garrett has done up until this point, other than maybe be a part of overall great team success. Yes, 2020 led to a playoff win on the road, led to almost a second playoff win on the road. But it is a little different. Obviously most of the time, number 1 overall picks are quarterbacks. It's kind of difficult to equate what Myles should be as a former number 1 overall pick when he is only on the defensive side of the ball. So to, say that this is where franchise players are supposed to get you. Yes, that is the case. Certainly there's a lot of those things that are out of his hands and have been out of his hands. But we believe that Andrew Berry, through Kevin Stefanski, they have now put themselves in a position where that this could be, something that becomes something that, Myles can basically knock off here over the next couple of years and be a continued presence within the NFL playoffs. Pete, I think we're, I'm sure probably, nobody's surprised as to where number 1 will go here. But you make this move for Jim Schwartz. You make this move to elevate the defensive line play in a system that is going to be hinged to the success of the defensive line. And none of that happens without, basically saying, Jim, Myles Garrett, that enough to start with, then we'll see what we can do from here.
Look, Myles Garrett is the only player on defense that can completely take over a game. And we've seen him do it on any number of occasions, including in that run where he had a sack fumble like 4 games straight or whatever it was. Scored touchdowns, basically beat the Ravens. And the other part of that is when he's not on the field, it's painful how much difference it makes. And
Atlanta last year.
Yeah, I mean, look, Za'Darius Smith and Okoronkwo should help a little bit. But the bottom line is he's the dude. And, part of the reason Za'Darius Smith wanted to come here was so he didn't have to face double teams, just like Jadeveon Clowney before him, because Myles Garrett's going to get him. He leads the league in double teams and still dominates and does all these things. He sets the table for everything else. So he's the best player. And the defense has not proven that they can succeed without, keep float without him. And, right now he's not at OTAs, which I'm not too worried about, as long as he's doing the things that he needs to do in terms of, being the leader and getting his toe right. But look, he's the best. If he's not the best pass rusher in the league, I don't know who is. When you get into the nitty gritty of just how often he's doubled and everything else, and still managed to just absolutely destroy blocks.
And the thing, and look, you can get to this, and look, you can find basically nowadays any statistical breakdown to basically try and fit your own narrative. But so if you're going to go that route, that's fine. And you want to say, oh, well, so-and-so is better. But you know what? Take your favorite 10 statistical breakdowns and see where Myles falls. Because guess what? If he's not 1, he's 2, or he's 3. And that's consistent. And if you go through all 10 of them, Myles makes the cut in the top 3 in every single one of them. Game wrecker, no question about it. Like you said, the flair for making the big play. And we have obviously seen that time and time again. Bengal games, we've seen him go in, strip sack. Not only strip sack, recover the fumble. 2 years ago, late in the season, at home against the Ravens, strip sack, take it to the house for the touchdown. I mean, about the only thing he hasn't done is, maybe get that, the third tight end gimme touchdown throw. And I just don't think that's something the Browns are ever going to risk with number 95. Pete, you and I, we were doing a show, not Locked On Browns back at the time, but we were doing a show when the pick came down. And at the time, the Browns, the way they were structured, they were just not ready to, go all in on the quarterback. Look, Patrick Mahomes, wouldn't have been the worst thing in the world, sure, but, was everything else in place? But, Pete, this is one thing that in 2017, back in those days, when it seemed nothing ever went right, they did get right, and it's still reaping the benefits to this day. Myles has never been a malcontent. He has never been a get me the heck up out of here. He truly, and, probably because, there was interaction and obviously has a relationship with a guy like Joe Thomas, understanding, look, success is never guaranteed, but, you play this game, you get paid a lot of money. You are asked to represent a city, a ownership, a team, and to the best of your abilities, and all boxes checked, and, absolute star player in this game.
Sure. And there are still people who have to own the fact that they wanted Mitchell Trubisky, and they're never going to live that down. And there should be
you probably get him if you want.
They should still be in some sort of football jail for that. But no, Myles Garrett's look at him. He's just, he looks like he was built in a lab. He's just an absolute monster. And, he's the guy that everybody's compared to at this point. Like Will Anderson, picked by the Houston Texans. And then the argument is, well, he's not Myles Garrett's class, which, he's not. But that's how good Myles Garrett is, he's the standard.
And, look, this is the thing. And it's been difficult because, everybody, how they feel about Joe Thomas, and understanding it just never came for him. At least Myles has tasted a tiny bit. Obviously, the appetite is there for a ton more as far as, deep team success, which means meaningful games in January, perhaps maybe even God willing, that second Sunday now in February to get that opportunity. But Myles Garrett is basically, the old Reggie Jackson, the straw that stirs the drink. But they have done a fantastic job here in just making this defensive line as a whole, not just basically Myles Garrett and the Garretts. There is a lot of depth here, and we're going to get to that in segment 2. Pete Smith, Sports Illustrated Browns Digest, with your host, Jeff Lloyd, along for the ride. Make a fast break over to FanDuel. Look, only a couple games left in the Eastern Conference Finals, maybe one game, possibly two. Then we get to the NBA Finals because right now, new customers get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That is $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. Look, FanDuel, the site is simple. It's easy to navigate. You get paid instantly. They offer great promotions every day. There's no better place to bet all the playoff action than America's #1 sports book. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Jeff Lloyd, Pete Smith taking you through here your latest Locked On Browns. Obviously, the everydayers, you guys could not be more appreciated for everything you do to the new traffic coming through lately, whether it was draft talk, whether it was the Za'Darius Smith trade, whether it is OTAs, and we'll get to some of that. Obviously, we had this week planned here. We will get to all that as well, but for the new folks, be more like the everydayers. Make sure you subscribe to the Locked On Browns YouTube channel. You have your notifications on. Audio-wise, Locked On Browns is always available, always free, wherever you get your podcasts. Now, Pete, you had mentioned on it, and obviously, last year, this defensive line, Myles obviously missed a little time. Atlanta game sticks out here. But this defensive line, it was poor. And poor may be a kind word, maybe poor. But so what do you do when you see something is so bad? It is such a negative, and you have to change your entire defensive system. You need to bring in a new lead man to lead that defense. So why not go find a guy whose defenses in the past have relied upon and have heavily flourished under defensive line play? So basically, you go get Jim Schwartz, one of the best defensive coordinators in the game, who is also a guy who is big in defensive line play and also maybe a big Jordan Kunasek fan as well. So you give him one of the best defensive linemen in the NFL. And then you go out, you make power plays for a guy like Dalvin Tomlinson. You go out and you get Ogbonnia Okoronkwo. You go out after the draft and you get him a player the ilk of Za'Darius Smith. And there's an opportunity here, Pete, for this defense and defensive line and defense as a whole to go from a bottom 5 unit to potentially a top 10, top 5 unit if all goes right and this team can gel as quickly as they need to.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Jadeveon Clowney in 2022, and on the numbers, he was basically as effective at rushing the passer as Dalvin Tomlinson was as a B-gap defender for the Vikings.
$14.5 million.
Well, yeah, I mean, it just wasn't good. Ogbonnia Okoronkwo, ascending player in many ways. We're going to see just how much of an especially with now that they have Dalvin Tomlinson, just how much of an uptick he has in terms of snaps. If his metrics scale with his increased snap usage, he's going to have a big year. Za'Darius Smith, he's been fantastic. 36 sacks in his last 49 games. Averages over his past 3 full years, he averages over 80 pressures a year, which is even more than Garrett does, in part because he's facing the less of a problem in terms of guys that Garrett is. But that's the point. I mean, I wrote that, the top 5 teams, if you go by Pro Football Focus, the top 5 teams had at least 375 pressures. The Browns had 246 last year. Just Garrett and Za'Darius Smith, based on what they've done over the past 3 full seasons, would average 100. That would come out to 150. So you're 40% of the way there with those two. So Okoronkwo, if he can, bring something to that, if Dalvin Tomlinson can help with that. But that being said, you're going to need to also get more from those younger guys that did nothing. I mean, Isaiah Thomas was your best rookie by far. He didn't play that many snaps. Alex Wright and Perrion Winfrey were awful in that regard. So they need guys to step up big. They've got Isaiah McGuire. They've got Siaki Ika. They could still bring in more help. Tristan Hill, interestingly, on a very small sample size, was interesting against true pass set. He was like a 25% win rate, which may be why he's here. And then Maurice Hurst, if you go all the way back to 2020 and 2019, was decent with the Raiders.
But overall, Pete, now this unit, and look, it would be extremely difficult to be worse than this unit was in 2022. You had a player that you thought, you relit the lamp in him in 2021. You ended up having to pay him, I guess it was almost $6 million more in 2022. And with that pile of money you dropped on him, you burned out any flame that was inside said player. The defensive tackle room, look, they tried, they prayed, they hoped that some of these guys that they invested in through the draft would work out. That didn't happen. Taven Bryant was, and I would say Taven Bryant was okay, but I think a lot of people think Taven Bryant was better than that just because of how porous the rest of the room was. You had guys between Alex Wright and Isaiah Thomas, and we had talked about this at the time that maybe the path was there for Isaiah Thomas to be a better rookie than it was for Alex Wright. Obviously, Isaiah Thomas a little older, coming from Oklahoma, a little bit more experience against the talent he was going to go against. Alex Wright, there were times where, he looked like he was getting it as far as assignment type of player. We did not get to see much as far as just what we thought was a gifted athletic player. That has not happened. And, now he's number 94, was 94, was 99, now will be 91. But you keep adding to that room, and look, you will never have enough pass rushers in the NFL. So that's why everybody, the room looks deep right now. Yeah, but what is the standard now? The standard has been raised. When you bring in a player like Jim Schwartz, that elevates what the expectation is of this defensive line as a whole overall. You are going to get after the quarterback. If you don't get after the quarterback, you are most likely not going to play. But the key is to get after the quarterback, get him off his timing, get him off his spot. And you have defensive backs with playmaking ability who are there to rattle. I don't want to say rattle. They are there to capitalize on a quarterback who has been rattled.
Sure. Look, pressure leads to mistakes. Pressure leads to turnovers. Pressure leads to all the good things defenses want to have happen. Generate as much of it as you can. Even the best quarterbacks will eventually crumble. Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Obviously, that was a ridiculous situation with the amount of pressure the Bucs were getting, but the point still stands. So the front is going to fuel the rest of the defense. The corners should be much better. Safety linebackers should benefit in terms of run defense. The safety should benefit in the fact they don't have to cover up for the run defense and be able to be more focused on coverage, more predictable situations in terms of what it forces the offense to do. All those are good things. So look, it's there for those guys to make it happen. And Jim Schwartz is going to do various loops and stunts up front to try to create plays for those guys as well. So it's going to be a tough competition to see who makes that final roster spot or who's able to sort of come through and be that next guy up. We'll see what happens, but look, the expectation is they're going to be good. There's reason to believe that they're going to be good. And, Za'Darius Smith benefited from Daniel Hunter. Ogbonnia Okoronkwo kind of benefited from Jerry Hughes. They both should benefit more from having Myles Garrett.
No question about it here. We're going to switch it up here, and obviously everybody, you've gotten to it to this point. If you haven't gotten to it this point, the Dalvin Tomlinson episode, the Amari Cooper episode, the Denzel Ward episode, Myles Garrett today. You will get one more before the week closes out, featuring the number one most important Cleveland Brown for the 2023 season. Appreciate all the everydayers who make Locked On Browns their first listen. To anybody new, be like the everydayers. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Browns on YouTube. Notifications on audio-wise, always available and always free wherever you get your podcasts. We've gotten the chance to get some of the new Cleveland Browns, and now we've gotten a chance to obviously see them as far as initial pressers. Now we're getting to see them through pressers after the OTAs. Pete, first things first, Za'Darius Smith, and this may be something that Myles Garrett, number one, he's going to appreciate Za'Darius Smith and his work ethic and the player that he is. But you want to talk about a man that can hold court. as far as with the press. And right off the bat, go, hey, that's a good question. Of course, these things all look great now. We could find Za'Darius Smith come week 4 and, might not be the same guy, but you see him, active, engaging, willing to answer the questions. Same thing with Juan Thornhill. And we've talked about this in the past. Myles Garrett, is he a leader? Yes. Is he a born leader? Maybe not so. And that is more than fine. Leadership is something that's kind of just in you. You either are a leader within a locker room or you're not. And the worst things that happen sometimes with athletes is trying to pretend or trying to make yourself a leader, because it comes off fake and it just doesn't always work out that way. And it's not that Myles couldn't do this if he truly wanted to, but there also is other things. Za'Darius Smith talked today in front of, what he sees, and, this is how I do this. And, he was mentioning, looking back beyond the line of scrimmage and making sure your feet are lined up this way. These are things that a lot more guys on that roster are going to relate to, because when Myles just says, I slapped my best move on him, I bent this way, flexed my ankle, and the next thing you know, I dropped Joe Burrow and recovered the fumble. Not everybody can pick up tips from a guy who is just an absolute God-given creation. Sometimes when a guy like Za'Darius Smith talks, you might have a little bit more understanding because he's not a world-class athlete. So this is something that may help the Browns and Myles Garrett as far as dealing with the media, representing the franchise, also within helping young guys understand more about what it physically takes, technique. Hey, that's not going to work for you. So if they tell you here, make that shade a little bit wider than that because you're going to need it. These are all things that you can get from a player like Za'Darius Smith, and maybe a little bit more like Olivier Vernon was in his time here. Certainly not like Jadeveon Clowney was, where Jadeveon Clowney was all about himself.
Well, look, Za'Darius Smith was clearly trying to make an impression, coaching dudes up, was very eager to answer questions, humongous person, big smile, big personality. And some of that was he clearly heard the talk.
Oh, yeah.
About him potentially, being a potential issue for the team. So he was very well prepared for the questions that were coming. Gave a lot of detail. Just and some of that's just genuine excitement. It's first day of school essentially for these guys. So like you get a little bit of excitement. It's fun. It's fun at this point. But like you said, we'll see what happens when it's August and the dog days are here. But look, he wants to get what he feels is the story straight. He wants to get what he thinks is out there. He's saying, and you listen to him, especially when you explain the contract thing, makes all the sense in the world to me.
Damn straight.
The way it was structured, that he wanted to be in a situation where he could sort of get himself back into free agency, that he was basically forced to sign, forced in quotation marks, a deal that was like based around the idea that he was going to be always hurt. Or that being injured was a real concern. And that's still true in the Browns deal. But as he pointed out, he's going to hit free agency again, as opposed to being locked into a longer deal like he would have been with the Vikings. And like, a lot of his other stuff, he was trying to win over the media a little bit, which largely was successful, it seemed like today. So, in some ways you can say he's playing the game. I think,
fourth NFL city, Pete. Now he shouldn't come off like a newbie,
right? That's part of it too. So it's I think he did well for himself. I think he helped himself in that regard. But we shall see. The thing you have to remember is that no one's going to have more information of the other 31 teams based on last year, his time in Minnesota, than the Browns are, given the fact that Kevin Stefanski still knows people in that building. Andrew Berry's obviously his former lieutenant is the GM of that team. So if they're selling him a bill of goods, that would be a big problem. I don't see that as the likely scenario. I think they got whatever they were told was straightforward and honest, and they felt good enough about what they could do with him and the risk reward and all that. So It's up to him to prove it. I don't, again, like he's averaging over 80 pressures a year over the last 3 years and at least 10 sacks. How awful can it be to have that?
Well, and the other thing is, Pete, you can say whatever you want about him, but it's not a guy who physically told the defensive coordinator 15 minutes before the game was about to start, I'm only going to play on third down. So, I mean, there is that going into it. But I do want to mention Juan Thornhill. And this comes from the same type of beat, but this is what you're expecting from guys who've, been predominantly with winning franchises. And Juan Thornhill, obviously spoke about what his feelings are at this point to Jim Schwartz. Spoke eloquently about trying to carve his own niche. And look, anybody that's been a part of this Chiefs run, if your name's not Travis Kelce and your name's not essentially Patrick Mahomes or Chris Jones, you're going to be guys who won rings riding the back of Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Chris Jones. So, it was interesting him to talk about, trying to find his own place, mark his own place. And the fact that, he is, going somewhere where he feels it's starting up again. The other thing I liked was just, being honest about it. We're starting from the basics here. There is no essential free safety. There is no essential strong safety. We're learning things, a mirror pace, on this side, on that side, seeing it all develop. And the one other thing that I truly liked about Juan Thornhill is asking about whatever went on last year with the Browns. First things first, he wasn't here. So how does he have these conversations with these guys? The other thing is where would he go? Oh, that must have really sucked because we were popping champagne bottles and on parade floats and we've gone to Super Bowls, 3 times in 4 years. So that was definitely a weird question to ask, but you like the focus, you like the positivity. And, for what he said, I like a guy that's willing to basically put himself out there and say, I want to go plant a flag and, I want to do something that maybe is based a little bit more on me, which is kind of, what Thornhill can do here because this team has been looking for a true free safety for 7 years, 8 years, 9 years, however long you want it to be.
I don't get any of this. People clamor that Browns need leadership. He's trying to lead. And said, not like that. People are frustrated that players for the longest time didn't want to come to Cleveland unless it was just for a paycheck and past their prime. Juan Thornhill's in his prime. He's coming from a team where he won 2 Super Bowls. Like, why would we want him to have his soul crushed when he's been here 20 minutes already?
Do we want to go back to cryptic tweets? Because I certainly don't want to go back to cryptic tweet season.
I just, at what point are you like, you can, and I get it. Look, man, here's the thing. If he says all this stuff, which by the way, all he said is they're going to win this year. I know that's
the horror,
dangerous.
The absolute horror.
It's dangerous that he would say something that controversial. Whether he says this stuff in May or not, and they suck, he's going to hear about it. They're going to take heat. So I want the guy who's excited to be here. And look, that stuff can be infectious. I mean, look, just the way you need sort of an ass kicker who's going to, kick your guys in the butt when it's, when guys don't feel like practicing and working hard and all that stuff. You do need somebody who's somebody you want to be around. You don't want to be around a miserable cuss all camp and during the season who's just constantly just a negative energy vampire type person. Juan Thornhill's not that. And unless this proves to be just fake, and I don't see any reason it would be, then I'm all for it. I want more of this. I want more guys who are excited to be here. I want more guys who are saying, no, we're going to win, because that's what fans have been claiming, and media have been claiming they want forever. And then they get it. It's like, well, this is already I don't like this. Make up your mind. They can't play games in September and May. They can't. So let him be happy.
And look, he, his wife, obviously the dog, starting a new life together, and obviously, totally unfamiliar. And look, if you're leaving the Kansas City Chiefs, it's a really, really difficult spot to be in because, look, top dog, Kansas City Chiefs probably are the top dog of the NFL right now. But it comes to time where you got to move on and to be excited about something new, to start something. And, and look, you look at Deshaun Watson, you look at Nick Chubb, you look at Amari Cooper, you look at Myles Garrett, you look at Dalvin Tomlinson, you look at that offensive line. If you were to say, I think maybe we could win a few games this year, everybody'd be like, well, what do you mean we're only going to win a few games? You're damned if you do. You're damned if you don't. So you want to know what? I mean, you want to wear your heart on your sleeve, Juan Thornhill? Go for it. Do it. And look, us who do what we do, and we're the content business, the media, if you don't think the expectations should be high for this team, then I don't know what you're looking at, because there's talent everywhere. Yeah, we maybe don't know who the second starting defensive tackle is yet, but we're having conversations on, I'm not sure who the 5th or 6th defensive end is, as opposed to trying to go find that guy in August or the first weekend in September, for God's sakes. So Juan Thornhill, Za'Darius Smith, we'll see how long it takes till they possibly break you. But the fresh air, it is always appreciated in these bars. He is Pete Smith. Browns Digest, SportsIllustrated.com. Pete and his team over there do a fantastic job. Make sure you're reading the content. Bunch of stuff put out every single day. So go ahead, make sure you're checking that out. Again, at _Pete Smith _. Make sure you're following Pete. Myself, Jeff Lloyd, at Jeff _LJ _Lloyd. The show at Locked On Browns. Again, the everydayers, we appreciate you all so much for making Locked On Browns your first listen. My suggestion is, if you're new, you're a first timer, is to be more like the everydayers and make Locked On Browns your first listen. And the best way to do that is to subscribe to the Locked On Browns YouTube channel. Notifications on, so when the content drops, you all are there to digest it. Always free, always available audio-wise wherever you get your podcast. This has been your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound. LGB on the LOB. Let's go Browns.